Hello, Hockey World. It is Wednesday, May 27th, 2025.
Hi, I'm Kevin Allen from Detroit Hockey Now.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching Hockey Buzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. We're here to talk about all sorts of things hockey and not just the NHL. Today, we're going to start off with the World Hockey Championships, which are kind of historic, Kevin.
Well, it's just really interesting for me, for all the years that I covered hockey for USA Today, I was one of the few writers that always would pay attention, at least the best I could, because I had to cover the NHL playoffs and the World Championships. And,
Yeah.
through that all, I watched America really never have much impact in those championships. And they had not won at the World Championship since 1933, but that all changed, obviously, in this tournament where they won it. And, you look at that team, and certainly it was a talented team, but we've seen teams that I think were better than this one and didn't win. But this one had it, together, coming back and beating a Swiss team that had beat them earlier in the tournament. And I just think, this was a really big win, and it's not going to receive much fanfare because we don't really pay much attention. Although I did see it on NBC had something on it the next day just because of the magnitude of the 92 years between championships.
Yeah, that's a story right there, right? So,
yeah, and then the other aspect of that's somewhat forgotten. I always had to play around a little bit with the words because, believe it or not, even though they have not won that tournament since 1933, prior to doing it against the Swiss, they actually were credited with a world championship in 1960 because in that year they decided that whoever won the Olympics would also be the world champions.
okay.
So the 60 Olympic team of the U.S. at Squaw Valley, led by the Cleary brothers and Johnny Mayasitz and Jack McCartan in goal, won the 1960 gold medal. And because of that, they were the world champions. So they have been world champions before, but they had not won at the world championship since 1933. So, big win. Tage Thompson gets the goal if you weren't watching that. Cutter Gauthier, I thought, just really distinguished himself as well in that tournament. A lot of guys did. I mean, if I start listing them off, I'll forget one. But it was really great. And Jeremy Swayman, you got to talk about him. He played terrific in goal.
He's kind of like the third U.S. goalie, right? Like, basically.
I think he sort of needed that.
He needed that one.
Just because, I just think, this was not a fun season for the Bruins.
No.
And yet, they went with him in the World Championships. He was their guy, and he delivered in such a way that no goalie has been able to do at that tournament, in 92 years. So I thought that was a pretty big win by him, and probably helped ease the kind of the pain of what they went through. And we talked before about last time about tanking and all that. Like, no one's done it more effectively than the Bruins did this season when they traded everyone and they lost, I believe it was 16 of their last 19. And Swayman was part of all that. So I think that's why sometimes you get some good karma at the right time, and I think he had good karma there at the World Championships.
Absolutely. And it was really the coach. Even the coach was fun. Like, he's the youngest coach in the NHL right now, and it's fun to see him and Werenski. And I thought it was really classy what they did with Gaudreau's jersey when they won the cup. For those who didn't see it, they brought it right up to the World Cup, the World Cup, and it was awesome because he's obviously a player who's been there. Like, he and Patrick Kane were kind of driving forces that would always seem to be there lately, and without either of those guys, that's a big drop off, like you said, talent wise. You don't have anybody who can come close to those guys on that team. But defensively, Zach Werenski obviously I think was the biggest star there, so to speak.
Yeah. I mean, they had the one great line there with Keller, of course. Was the captain of the team, and it kind of speaks to how far U.S. has come. Like,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
yeah, Keller. Um, I mean, I just don't sort of think of him as a traditional American captain, but
Yeah.
on that team, like he was, like when you looked at that collection of guys, then that's who it
Yeah.
ended
I
up
mean, and
being.
it's incredible because it's almost like the USA B team in a way. Because we saw like the World Cup of Hockey, that being the A team. I'm not the I mean, the Four Nations, that being the A team.
Yeah,
With the World Championships here.
yeah,
Yeah,
it was kind of to be honest with you, it was probably the B minus team,
yeah,
because the third and fourth lines. Always the Americans have had trouble recruiting to
yeah,
this tournament. Canada does too, but to a lesser extent. They just have more players, and that's sort of changed,
yeah,
um, through the years. But it's easier for European teams
yeah.
to get their guys to come. This is more meaningful. The World Championship is more meaningful over in Europe than it is
I mean,
here.
I've
But
talked to people who go, and then they often say, from over here, and they often say that they want to end their season on a more of an upbeat than it ended. That's something that in their heads a lot of times. Like if they got knocked out of the playoffs or whatever, they're going to go over there and try to before they go into summer mode, have like a better ending.
well, yeah,
It's kind of like your
I,
second chance.
I've had conversation with players about this, and
Mhm.
I've always, I mean, it wasn't really a debate. I just said, like, I never really understood, like, if you have the opportunity to play in something like this,
Yeah,
and they allow you to, bring your family, so you can bring your wife and girlfriend or
yeah,
whatever, and they can kind of share in it all. I just don't know
yeah,
why you wouldn't do it. And the
yeah,
players who don't go always say, "Well, it's a long season and all that." And I said, "Well, let me just put in my perspective."
yeah,
I said, back then I was covering 4 rounds of playoffs, usually jumping between two
yeah,
series. And when it was all done, I had done all 4 rounds of the playoffs, and I had, had the
yeah,
same amount of travel in worse situations than they were in. And I said, if you told me at the end of it, hey, we're going to play the NHL Stanley Cup champion against the top team in Europe, whatever's judged that to be, and we're going to play a 7-game series. Would I want to be a part of that? Well, sure, of course I would. I would
yeah,
want it. I would want to cover that,
yeah.
regardless of what I had gone through. So, um, I don't know. It just
No,
doesn't.
it is strange, and I think because I do think that players in the U.S. especially and Canada too, they we've talked about this before, that they have their NHL careers and they have their international careers, right? So this is their international career we're talking about here. So these guys are there to make a case for them being on the Olympic team. That's a lot of that's going on. That's why they show
Yeah,
up time after time again. And like a guy like Travis Konechny, for example. They kind of had a great series. I mean, Travis Konechny played with Nathan McKinnon, and they were lights out. They were really strong together. Konechny at Four Nations was okay, but not great, right? So he makes a bigger impact now than he did then, and now Konechny's chances of making the Olympic team are a lot higher next time around. So
yeah. I mean, I think, and I think that's the way it should be. Like, if
yeah,
look, you got to take the best players.
yeah,
But in a lot of cases, because you really are splitting hairs when you choose an elite all-star team, ties should go to the loyal, players.
and in Canada they always have.
Yeah,
Canada's been
well,
playing.
and I think the U.S. has had players, that have always shown up when asked. I mean,
Yeah,
I remember Jack. What I used to say about Jack Johnson is, if you ask him to join the Team USA, he'll be there.
yeah, yeah,
And Chris Chelios played a lot
yeah,
as well. Patrick Kane has gone over there,
yeah,
and
yeah,
Dylan Larkin has gone. I think Dylan would have gone this year if not for the fact that he and his wife had their first child. It was just a week
yeah.
ago, and I think he would have been there as well. So,
Well, yeah,
a lot of the guys do go, and I like the. I said this before, that that it seems like there are some top players who like to round up a few friends and say, let's go over to Europe and win a world
yeah,
championship. I think
yeah.
Sidney Crosby tried to do that this year.
He
He's
did.
done it in the past and
Yeah,
successfully. And, he got his buddy Nathan McKinnon decided to go over, and they thought they were going to have a really good time, and then a bunch of the guys that we don't never heard of from Denmark sort of changed.
That's the crazy thing. Like we had like a literal miracle on ice happen in front of our eyes.
Yeah,
in Denmark beating Canada.
yeah. I mean, that's their miracle on ice, to be
That's
sure.
the biggest moment. And Nick Giller said so much. He said as much. I hope people understand how crazy this is. Like he said in his interview afterwards, he's like, "This is really something for Danish hockey."
Yeah. I mean, and it's like in Salt Lake when Belarus beat Sweden.
Yeah,
that was their miracle on ice. You know? And
it's really crazy, and I love to see that because Denmark hockey. It's in Denmark too. There is definitely a home ice advantage that goes on. I think with these teams, you've seen it in the World Championships a little bit. Czechia last year winning it all when they were at home.
Well, and I think if you've never been to Europe and watched European hockey, there's something really special about it. I wish we could actually capture it with the NHL, and it's very collegiate. And by that I mean, if you've ever been to a college hockey game or in college football games when the student section's all fired up. Well, that's just the way the fans are in hockey. I remember being over in Davos and the wooden arena there, and they have a guy beating on the drum and he calls out cadence. And they what I loved about that place was the fans announced the goal. So the announcer would just say, goal by number 7, and then everybody yells his name, and then
that's great.
Assists number 4, and then they shout his name.
Oh, that's nice. I like that.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a great tradition, and I really really enjoyed it. But yeah, I mean, there's just air horns and things, and it's just exciting. And at the like the Latvians are so much fun at the World Championships because they really get into it. They just they get all fired up. And
I mean, these people, the hockey is like often second to soccer, right, in their worlds,
right?
And what they're doing is they're really bringing fan stuff from soccer into hockey. That's really what they're doing, with all the banging and the chants and the different songs that they have. They're bringing the soccer stuff in there, which is really great, and it's really fortunate that college hockey has kind of picked up on that too. And a different.
Well, I think the college hockey, I think that stuff goes back to the days of the Ivy Leagues, and
I think it does too.
Like my son played NIA soccer, and it's small schools, but when you go to those small schools, like the whole student body would show up for the soccer games. Like I can't remember. I think my son was playing against. I think it was a school called Goshen. And anyway, and you go there and there's like 3,000 people in the stands, and they chant, they have chants. And, my son, who was a fullback, he was a defender. He said, I hope I'm not on the crowd side because they usually pick on, the right fullback. And, it turns out he was a left fullback. So as it turned out, he didn't get to pull up with him. Or you didn't have to put up with them, but it was just so much fun. I mean, just crazy chants and it was just a lot of fun. And I remember saying at the time I said, this must be what turn of the century Ivy League football was like. When they would all get together and organize chants and Yale, Harvard, Yale, that sort of thing. Because I really do think it was. Kind of fun. The only thing was missing is that my son didn't have exactly a large delegation traveling from his school to compete with
that. I mean, it's. I know people who have gone to Yale, gone to Harvard, and gone to Cornell, and they'll all tell you that the toughest season ticket to get is the hockey ticket. That's the one. That's the one you can't. If you want to get tickets to the hockey game, that's the hardest by far.
Yeah, well, I believe that at those schools. It's probably not the case at Ohio State football or Michigan football.
I bet it's also the case in Princeton. I bet it is because again, the Princeton's put a really good team on the ice lately. But Penn State, we need to ask our buddy Luke who goes to Penn State. But I know that Penn State hockey tickets are impossible to get too. I mean, obviously the football tickets are hard to get as well, but that hockey has taken off there in a big way.
Yeah, well, Maybe so. I mean, you got to
Yeah.
look too. Like in Michigan, you get 110,000 in football stadium, and what is Yost
Yeah.
going to Venable hold? I don't know, but it's only a few thousand to be
Like
sure.
7 or 8, maybe.
So maybe
Yeah.
not even that.
I've
It's
never been
great.
there.
It's a great venue, by the way. It's just terrific, and they have a lot of chants there. That some of them are impolite to say the least, but they're so much fun. It's never fun to be the visiting goalie in Yost Arena. So
Yeah. No. It's also fun right now if you get a chance to watch the also what's going on is the Memorial Cup is happening, and that's being televised on the NHL Network and TSN as well. And that's a lot of fun because you get to see what's going to be our topic today, which is, and we'll get into you guys know what's happening in the playoffs, so we're not going to have to go there very much. Instead, we're going to go into another topic here because we're going to talk about, because one of the players playing in the Memorial Cup is a no doubt about it generational player. And that's Gavin McKenna. He is up there with anybody I've ever seen at that level. Like, it's just, he is ridiculous. He's still not even draftable this year. He's still a year away from being drafted, and he's dominating everything all the time. Like, he's the smoothest generational player I've seen since I don't know. I can't even compare him to anybody. I don't know, because I made a list of generational players here, and you and I are going to decide if they are or are not generational players.
okay.
And by defining that, and then we might put them into some kind of like battle next time and like have like a 1 versus 16 type thing. But I have 16 guys here. McKenna is going to be a generational player, though. Have you got to see him play?
I have not seen him live. I have seen video of him, and I agree with your assessment. I mean, he's just, so dynamic, and the build up too. You can sort of judge it by the build up, and the build up for him.
It's different.
Although I do think I got fooled a little bit on Macklin Celebrini, because I don't think the build up for him was befitting how good he really is.
Not at all. No.
Like because of the buildup of him wasn't, say, as strong as Bedard.
Yeah.
I just assumed, he's, just not in that category, but I think he's every bit as good as Bedard.
I mean, so the difference, I think, is Celebrini was playing his younger hockey in San Jose. You know what I mean? And that's the difference between like Bedard, who was playing in Canada somewhere, for a while.
Yeah.
But, Celebrini is Canadian. He does play for Team Canada, which I'm really angry about. If I ever meet him in person, I'll tell him that he shouldn't be playing. He's definitely played more of his hockey in the USA, but I've watched him. Gavin McKenna is ridiculous. He just has this. He's one of those guys that slows the game down, like Peter Forsberg-ish. Like when he has the puck, people are terrified to make a move on him because they know they're going to look stupid. So he has this whole thing where they don't know if they want to stick check because they'll look dumb. And he's not even draftable this year. He's draftable next year. That's why another reason you can tell that the hype is to hear a hype on a guy who's still 2 years away.
Yeah,
is really rare. And you hear it, but you don't hear it to the level of this kid. It's definitely worth watching on one of these on NHL Network, one of these games, because he's replaced for Medicine Hat, and he's just crazy good. It's just and he's so calm. He played in the World Juniors too for Canada, and didn't play all that much, but did play enough in the World Juniors. And he was out there when they needed to, like when Canada was down and looks like they were going to lose the World Juniors to the US, which they did. McKenna was on the ice every other shift. And it was kind of crazy because that's like, before that they were kind of spotting him out there, but they realized he's just their best player. Like he was their best player. I mean, and even though he's so young. All right. So what defines a generational player is always a tricky one, right? Versus superstar. How do you define it differently?
Wow. Yeah. I think if it's, the type of player that can change the course of a franchise.
Yes, that's a good one. That's a good one.
And I think by that, we've seen, players like, Lemieux changed the Pittsburgh Penguins, saved the Pittsburgh Penguins, and Crosby did too.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
Gretzky, he changed the course of hockey.
Yeah, I mean, I always said that Gretzky's the difference between the Edmonton Oilers and Winnipeg Jets, basically, when they came in. That's how I saw it.
Yeah.
Winnipeg ended up leaving and coming back eventually, but Edmonton's still running strong.
Right.
It's such an impact. So I'm going to start off with the easy ones, I think.
Okay.
Sidney Crosby is a generational talent, yes?
Yes.
For sure, right? Ovechkin,
Yes.
I agree. McDavid,
Yes.
yeah. All right, gets a little bit harder now. Patrick Kane,
Yeah, that's difficult.
yeah,
Only because unlike those other players, Patrick needs help
yeah,
to accomplish all that.
yeah,
All those other guys can do it by themselves, make plays that are memorable. They can take
yeah,
on and attack one on one. Patrick Kane can do that occasionally, but what he's best is using the players that are on the ice with him to be, like he basically sets the pace for the Red Wings now. And when you watch him, even at his age, if he can't get it into the zone, they don't get it in the zone. So you know, it's really fascinating to me. But I'm going to say yes with a qualifier.
Okay,
I'm going to say yes because he and Taves were the guys that won 3
right,
championships for the Chicago Blackhawks, and they changed those rosters, they changed the people around them, but they kept winning them,
right.
and that's
They did.
because of Kane. So yeah, I'm going to say yes.
They did. I agree. Okay. Person I got to add here. Just thought about. Okay, so I'm going to say yes on all 4 of those as well. Now Nick Lidstrom,
Yes.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean, when you're talking about, he's either, depending on who you talk to, either 2 or 3 in terms of the greatest defenseman to play the game. I think you got to go there.
Yeah, I think you do too. And he's not often mentioned as a generational player, oddly enough.
No.
When I was going through this list and
Well,
trying to guys, he came up right away. But I'm like, yeah, no one ever calls him a generational player.
he just is not flamboyant. He's
Yeah.
not dynamic. He's not. He killed you. He was stealth like. You know. You were just as dead, but he didn't do it. And at the end of the game, I used to say in the press box when everybody's doing 3 stars, if you really didn't know who the star of the game was, it was probably Lidstrom.
I love that.
I mean, he was always you could always throw him as one of the stars because he was.
Right.
He could play incredible amounts of minutes. He was
All the time.
Tremendous one-on-one defender. He liked to play billiards. He banked things off the backboards.
Yeah.
They get the puck in front of the net. First pass always perfect, tape to tape. So
yeah, I mean, to me, the 3 best defensemen I watched play personally. One of them's on this list. So I'm not going to get to him yet. He's still on this list, but we're Lidstrom, that other guy, and Mark Howe. Like I loved watching Mark Howe play. He was just the same kind of thing as Lidstrom in a way to me. Like he was not super flashy either, but ridiculously consistent and just unbelievably smart. Like the big thing about generational players is their intelligence. Like they have to be intelligent people to be able to pull it off. All right, we're going to go to Nathan McKinnon. In the chat room too, by the way, throw in your yeses or nos, and we'll if we get to somebody where we can't decide, we might go with you guys. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
We can come back to it.
Yeah, it's at the top of my head. I'm thinking no.
You're gonna say no? I'm saying yes, but let's come back to it. Let's make a start and go back to that one. Martin Brodeur.
Yes.
I agree too. Yep. Jonathan Toews.
Yeah, just for the same reason that Patrick Kane is. But
see, I think he's less than Kane a little bit.
He is. I agree with you on that. But
just enough not to be a generational player.
I think it's disrespectful because I agree with you. I think Kane was more important.
Yeah,
because he could do more with the puck.
Yeah,
he had more magic. He was Hermione.
Right.
Harry Potter. He just had so.
Yeah. I think I'm saying no, but I'm saying no only because like if the border is 20 points, Patrick Kane has 21 and Taves has 19. That's where I'm at. Like Patrick
Yeah,
Kane,
I
first
mean,
in generation world.
I agree with everything you're saying. I really do.
Mhm.
But I do think, there's a respect that has to be paid to him because,
Okay.
he's, his leadership. He's the captain guy. He was the guy that was, the most serious.
He's also Captain Canada, right? Captain Canada too. That's another thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I'm going yes. Just
Okay. Evgeny Malkin.
no.
No. Okay. I'm with you on that. I think he could have been. I think it's his own fault that he's not. I know that's what
Well, and the presence of Sid.
Crosby.
Yeah.
But see, I don't think to me like the 1 year Sid wasn't there. Malkin won the MVP. Remember, and that year he looked every bit of generational talent. So to me, you should have been able to you should have been able to do that more often. Like my feeling on Malkin is every time has the puck, he should just go to the net with it because he's either going to score or draw a penalty. Malkin, he can't get a puck away from him. So it's like, but he doesn't do that. He floats around outside. He does, that's why I say no. Steven Stamkos.
No.
No, I'm with you there too. No. Close, very close.
Yeah, for sure.
Draisaitl.
That's tough.
Yep.
I'm going to say no, but I think he will be eventually once he. I mean, that seems silly to say. I almost regret that I like he's right there.
Like if for some reason McDavid was to go elsewhere,
yeah,
would he be a generational player right away? Right? Like,
yeah.
And he scores. And look at the goal scoring. Like he's the best.
Yeah, he's better. I don't even know why I'm saying no.
I'm saying yes.
So
you can say with no. It's cool. Austin Matthews.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I say no on this one. Go ahead. Why?
Because what he does in Toronto is incredible. Toronto's tough. I don't. Is there a tougher place to play? I don't think there is.
I just haven't seen him. Like he just looks so small for me in so many playoff games I've watched him. He doesn't do he kind of reminds me of like Joe Thornton when Joe Thornton was in Boston, where he was just not. He has all this talent, but doesn't get himself in position to score enough. Doesn't throw himself around. Like he needs to use his size more than he does. Austin uses his size horribly, in my opinion.
I think he uses it sometimes, but I mean, he could be better. That's to be sure. But I think I'm factoring in his backstory, where he came from. Eras coming out of Arizona, his status among American players. Other American players look up to him.
True.
So I'm just going to go yes on it.
Okay, I like that.
This is just opinion anyway. So
no, it's all opinion, but it's just something to think about. So Erik Karlsson.
Yeah. No.
I'm with you on no too. Nothing against Erik. Again, a great player, but too inconsistent in my mind. Nikita Kucherov.
No.
No. Okay, no. Cale Makar.
Yes.
Me too. Yes, for sure. I agree with you. 100% on that one. Connor Bedard.
Not yet.
Yeah, not yet.
I don't see it. So far I haven't seen it.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you. I haven't seen it yet either. Macklin Celebrini.
Yeah, there's something special about that kid. I've seen it more from him, but it's too early to know.
I think it's a yes, though. I think it's a yes, man.
It feels like a yes, but but I mean, come on, San Jose is so bad. It's hard to know how good this kid is.
But with just watching watching him play with Sid in Canada, this kid is amazing. Like Sid requested, that he play with him. Like Sid wanted him. Sid needed. He said, I want to play with Celebrini, and that's who he wanted to play with. And I think they're so friggin' similar. And I think that they're so their games are so much alike. Celebrini's like he looks like a kid now. He's a little bit smaller, you know. He's still got some room to grow for sure, but he yeah, but his
Yeah.
instincts are
I
Crosby.
mean, he looks like a generational player, but I guess
yeah,
before we bestow that on people, we should at least watch him 2 years at
yeah,
least.
that's like yeah. No, I'm with you. I think you're right. I mean, I'm gonna say yes though, because I just think that he's been more exciting to me than anybody I've seen in a long time. Like he is just different. Can you think of anybody I've left off this list? We got to go back to one. We got to go back to Nathan MacKinnon. Let's do that for a second, and let's debate this one because this is a good one.
I mean, he's dynamic. He can skate like crazy.
He won a Stanley Cup.
I've been always been bothered by, and he's good buddies with Sidney Crosby. So, Crosby every year, this was the shtick we had when I was at USA Today. I always went to Penguins training camp, and I went in, and before I even got to him, Crosby would be prepared about because I always wanted to know what he had worked on in the off season because that was his shtick. He took one thing that he wanted to be better at. One time people said he didn't score enough goals. So he went, home and shot a billion pucks, and he worked on his face-offs. And by where he's at now, like he's a great face-off guy, and there's he's a goal scorer, all that kind of stuff. Well, I've always been bothered that Nathan MacKinnon is terrible in the face-off circle and has never worked on it.
Yeah,
at least I assume he's not because he's never gotten any better.
Yeah, it's really true, and it gets unfair that he gets thrown with Crosby all the time, though. I think that, because that is the comparison because they're such good friends. They come from the same place, but
he gets a billion. He gets a billion points. He's a great hockey player. So I mean, I'm
better than Draisaitl. Let's talk about that for a second because we both. Yeah. Is he better than Draisaitl, MacKinnon?
Do I think MacKinnon's better than Draisaitl?
Yes.
He's more dynamic, but he's not better.
Not better. He's still the Draisaitl. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that for sure. I've got a couple more here. Victor Hedman.
No.
I mean, they do know. Definitely.
I love Victor Hedman, but no.
Yep. Shesterkin, the goalie.
No,
not yet either. That's a not yet for me, big time. But can you think of any others that I'm missing? Oh, I know because we're going back to 2004. Don't we still have to talk about Datsyuk?
Yeah, he wasn't a generational player either.
No.
I mean, he was incredible player, but incredible and generational are two different things.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I think that's true too. Like people are saying Jack Hughes and the
No,
I would say no, but Quinn Hughes.
Closer, but not yet.
Not yet, right? Yeah. I mean, yeah. I agree.
Those are. Again, I mean, if anybody who's watching this, these are all great players. Like,
we're not.
Like I almost, I hate that. The reason I took Taves saying that he's generational just is the respect I have for him.
Right.
And it's hard to not think of Taves and Kane together.
It is.
Because they're the reason. When we were talking about rebuilding teams, like it feels to me like they're the last team to, totally rebuild, based on, some draft picks,
I agree.
And it was, Taves and Kane together. So it's hard to separate those two, even though,
It is hard. Anze Kopitar.
No.
Yeah, me too. And this is, again, like we're not dissing these guys at all. We're just saying. Peter Forsberg.
I want to say yes, because he's so tough. One of the things that Pierre Lacroix said about me, and I'm not comparing the two of them, but it makes me smile when he told me this. Okay. And I looked it up, and he was right. Pierre Lacroix said, Peter Forsberg is the exact same size as Gordie Howe was when he played, and Gordie never varied more than 2 pounds his entire career. They were both 6. I think it was 6'2".
Yeah,
And
that is crazy. That is a
yeah,
crazy
and
thing
Peter Forsberg and Gordie Howe were the exact same size.
because Gordy was considered such a giant and such a big,
Yeah,
big.
I mean, Glenn Hall used to tell me that Gordie always seemed 6'8", but you got to remember back in that era, hockey players were 5'10",
Yeah,
175.
for
You know.
sure.
So, and in today's game, Gordie never picked up a weight in his life. He never lifted any weights or anything. He would have played at 220, 225.
Mhm.
In today's game.
Yeah, it would be totally different. I know. I agree. So we're gonna stay with McKinnon. I didn't really answer McKinnon. I'm still saying yes on McKinnon. You're still saying no. Is that where
Yeah, but I feel bad about it.
you don't have to feel bad about it.
Well, I do.
I'm not here to ruin your day, Kevin. I'm not.
I do feel bad about it.
So Forsberg, you're going yes or no?
I'm going to go yes. Because of the intangibles. The intangibles about his durability, greatest player ever to play without a spleen.
Greatest Swede forward, maybe or no? Yeah. I mean, I guess I would.
Perfected the move today. That the reverse hit. He was the guy that really perfected that. You're going to go hit him. And the greatest story I will tell about him, I just remember this so specifically. When Peter was very young, he's playing against the Blackhawks. Bob Probert was on that team, and Bob Probert elbowed Forsberg.
Right.
And this is about the first period. And later in the game, Forsberg came down the ice and gave it to Probert right back. And Probert didn't kill him. And he didn't even assault him at all. And after the game, I went in, and he said, I went to Probert and I said, Bob, you didn't kill him. And he essentially, I mean, I didn't phrase it like that, and he said, I just totally respect that kid. He goes, nobody comes back at me after I do that to them. And this kid, he just came right back at it. He goes, I just respect the kid, Yeah. And I never forgot that, that
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I do. That's amazing. I mean, honestly, that's what hockey's about. When you get hockey has a lot of that going on, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. He really admired Forsberg for doing that. So
we're gonna go to his teammate, Joe Sakic.
Yeah, Joe Sakic, which is like Yzerman. It's like saying Yzerman.
Right. Yzerman played in the 2000s, didn't he? No. Yzerman played in the 2000s. I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah.
But Joe Sakic.
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes. Again, the intangibles, the leadership. Everybody looked up for him, the respect factor, and he was a hell of a player. Changed. He was the leader of that franchise, and they transformed after they got to Colorado.
Yeah, no, he definitely. I'm with you on that one. Dominic Hasek.
You got so can you be a generational player when you arrive in the NHL that late? That's the only question I have. He certainly was transformative. He just had skill levels that were out of this world.
Yeah.
So,
but
how old was he when he got to the NHL? 25, 26?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I'll look it up. But yeah.
And he'd already been established by then, in the international.
But remember, he didn't come into the NHL like roaring. Like he came in Chicago, and it wasn't like it wasn't anything.
No.
Wasn't anything spectacular when he first came in. Like he came in.
But I don't know that he really got a real major chance back then.
Yeah, but he definitely. I mean, it wasn't until he got to Buffalo, right, that he really took off. And let me see if I can find it. Yeah. So we got another one for you right here. This is a good one too. This is going to be tough, I think. I can remember his name because I just had it. Chris Pronger.
If you forget his name,
it's Chris Pronger is the name.
Then he really can't be generational. So
Pronger, no.
Yeah, Pronger. It feels like we need a generational player of that ilk.
Right.
You know, the
Victor
guy
Hedman.
who
Victor
was
Hedman's another one, maybe, but we talked about him as no.
no, but they're different players.
Yeah, they're
I
different
mean,
players.
Pronger was intimidating,
Right.
and I once wrote a column about him, and I remember I said it's really unfair. We exalted Chris Pronger because he played on the edge of the rules.
Yeah.
And then when he'd go over the line, then we would just crucify him. And I said, I refuse to do that. If we're going to exalt him, because
Right.
you know what, if you're going to, for being on the edge of the rules,
Right, for sure.
well, you're going to fall over on the one side at some point. And it's unfair to him to say, yeah, we like it because, you're on the edge of that rules. You're playing a mean game. You're a little bit dirty. We like that in the NHL. And then all of a sudden, he gets his elbow up a little too high. He crushes someone a little too hard along the boards. And then, oh my God, he's a villain. We should, and I thought we can't have it both. Do we love Chris Chelios for being the dirtiest man in hockey? Or, should we have just said, no, don't play
He's
like
such a
that?
sweet guy. It's so hard. Like he was doing he had one in between periods on Hockey Night Canada this week, and he's just like, but he was intimidating to even cover. Like, you know what I mean? Like I've not been scared of many people when I go up to talk to them and ask them a question, but Pronger intimidated me. I was really afraid. Like he was just like, he looked at you in a way that's like, oh my God, you're gonna kill me.
Yeah, when he signed this big contract, the first one in St. Louis, right. I had they announced it in the morning, and I left a message. Again, this is when I was in USA Today, and I had known him like for a while, and I'd written a lot of pieces on him, and it was about like I wish I knew exactly what time it was, but somewhere in the course of the day, I figured out, oh, he's not going to call me. He's got a game tonight, and about 6:30 or so, or something like that, my phone rings, and it's Chris Pronger. He goes, Kevin Pronger here. And I said, what are you calling me? Aren't you going to go on the ice? He said, you left me a message. And I said, well, I did, but once I figured out you were going to play, I understood. And he goes, yeah. He said, well, we can wrap it up quick. So, but that's the kind of guy he was. I mean, as tough as he was. And, he always kept you on your feet. Like, he's the type of guy, like if you questioned him about, for example, just so people understood what it was like to ask him a question. If you ask him about, why he did something in a game, or what was his strategy in taking on this guy this way, he would say, well, what would you have done?
Sorry.
And he kind of put you on the spot. It's like the time when Ron Wilson, when I asked him a question about neutral zone trap, he said, do you even know what a neutral zone trap is? And he said, diagram a neutral zone trap for me. And
did you get him to do it?
Yeah, he was able to do it. It's not that complicated,
No, I know it's not.
So, I was at that point living in Michigan. By then I had moved back to Michigan, and they ran the left wing lock, which is very similar, where you just kind of close off one side of the ice. And so I could kind of show, look, you're just kind of hemming people in here, and then blah, blah, blah. So, but, and that's how Pronger was. Pronger was. No. Yeah, he would always sort of put you on the spot a little bit just to make you feel uncomfortable, because he felt like you were trying to make him feel uncomfortable, which he never was.
He never was. And he was funny. My funniest moment with him was during the Flyers Chicago series in 2010. I go up to him because he's been stealing the pucks. Remember this whole thing? Pronger was stealing the pucks when Chicago would win. Chicago had connected all their pucks and every win they'd had in the finals, but Pronger would steal them before they could get to them. And I caught him with my camera. I videotaped him doing it. And I went up to him and I said, why are you stealing the pucks? And he's like, I'm not stealing the pucks. And I'm like, and I got it on my camera here. I got your camera, you're stealing the pucks. He's like, oh, you must be thinking of that other puck someone threw on the ice at the end. I'm like, yeah, I guess that's it. Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, that was it. Like, he wasn't going to admit that at all. That was not going to happen. But I thought that was a beautiful thing, because He was doing it when the Flyers were losing, and so all the pressure was going back to the coach and the players and stuff like that, and he was really distracting it was really a distraction tactic on his part. It was like a brilliant captain like move, like I'm going to do this, and people are going to ask me about stealing the puck instead of asking like Mike Richards why I can't win a faceoff or what have you, that kind of thing. That was what really was good to see. I got 2 more for you, then we're going to get out of here. Bobrovsky.
No.
Yeah, me too, but it's getting closer. LeCavier?
No.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we have quite a list here. I'm going to eventually put these into like a bracket type system, Kevin, and we're going to have to go down and figure out who these are in order. But can you think of anybody else?
Well, what's the time frame?
2000 and on. So
if they were still playing in the league?
Yeah, if they're still playing from the year 2000. Yeah. So like Yzerman, is he playing in 2000?
Yeah, he was. Yeah.
Okay, let's put him on here. Yzerman, yes or no?
Well, I'd say yes, only because not only, but I was there, and the dead wing era ended when Steve Yzerman came aboard.
Yeah, I agree with you. As having a Red Wings father, as my father being a Red Wings fan, Yzerman was everything. Like he just was a totally different world.
Yeah, and I mean, people forget this because he basically played on one leg at the end of his career, and he was a defensive zealot by then. But in the beginning, like that, I always felt that the greatest player I ever saw on a breakaway, like was totally money, was Mario Lemieux. Like no one was better on a breakaway. He was just, I don't know what his percentage was, but it was high. He could put a puck wherever he wanted.
Yeah.
But number 2 was Steve Yzerman. I saw him a lot, and on a breakaway, he was money. Yeah, totally money. And I still to this day, like nobody is as good as Yzerman was and thing. And he was the leading in that one year where he got 150 points or whatever it was. And I remember writing that he was the scoring champion in the mere mortal division, meaning non Gretzky or Lemieux. And he was just amazing. Like there's just so much. And then to convert like he did to become a defensive zealot, and the surgery he had, like if you see Steve now, like he limps when he walks.
Really okay.
And I remember the quote from I interviewed the surgeon who did that, what was considered experimental surgery on his knee, and he said, I said, I remember asking, so, what is it, 100% that he's going to be able to continue playing? He goes, I have no idea. He said, I do this surgery on senior citizens so they can get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. I don't do it on elite athletes. And he goes, but, this is a different scenario. And obviously he was able to play, but.
Yeah, that's scary though.
Yeah. And prior to that, I mean, he in the 2002 Stanley Cup championships, when he'd fall on the ice, he'd have to use a stick to get up. He would just push his stick down and lift himself up. So, essentially he did play on one leg for his last, couple or three years. So.
I always feel like Dylan Larkin plays a similar game to him, not as well, of course, but it reminds me a lot of him. I don't know. It's just like, if I was to compare, that's me from the outside. You see Dylan all the time. So.
Yeah. I mean, they're not mentally the same,
right,
in terms of their approach to the games, but
yeah, I gotcha.
I mean, Steve was fast like Dylan was when he came up, and he was dynamic to say the least, and I think Steve was better at protecting the puck than Dylan is, but Dylan just gets 30 goals every year. Like, I mean, in this day and age, that's pretty darn good.
It's really good.
And I'll tell you what, the other similarity, back, and people forget this, but when in the 1980s, when I mentioned this before, when the Red Wings couldn't get out of their conference because of the Edmonton Oilers, when they had started to come along, Steve was the symbol of their playoff failures. And Detroit didn't really embrace the kind of Stevie
really
until they were going to trade him to Ottawa. And then it sort
I
of
remember.
forced the fan base in Detroit to
Yeah.
sort of come to realization of how
That's it.
much they really liked this player. And then all of a sudden he became like, he walks on water
Yeah,
here.
now he's a god. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
always used to like the comparisons to Howard Chuck with him too.
Yeah. I mean, the Sakic one, even to the point they wore the same number, is
Yeah,
pretty apt.
yeah,
And the impact they had on their teams. Neither one of them was very vocal in the dressing room, yet they were
right.
great
Both
leaders.
are general managers now.
I mean, Joe was called Quoteless Joe. Uh, so
Yeah,
never said a whole lot.
never said a whole lot at all. No. But yeah, I mean, we'll get into guys like we'll do this again when we get into the earlier guys like Howard Chuck and Timu Solani and Gordie Howe and all that stuff. We'll do another version of this with people before 2000, which will be a lot harder. but I think that I'm going to ask you this one question before we leave, and that is this: so when Wayne Gretzky and Messier were playing for the Edmonton Oilers, did you believe that Messier was a generational player at that time?
No, I wouldn't have said so. But
Right.
as time wore on, you realized again. I think maybe I put more emphasis on the intangibles than others do for generational. Maybe when they are sorting out generational, they're just talking about talent. But
Yeah.
as time wore on, you realize the impact he has as a leader.
Yeah.
And now there's kind of a debate who was the better captain. Was it Messier or Yzerman?
Yeah. Right.
Splitting hairs, but
I mean, I bring this up because of the McDavid Draisaitl comparison. I think Draisaitl's in the same base basically, right? Like as Messier was.
Yeah.
Probably. I don't know. Does he score more than Messier did? Maybe, but Messier was so tough too, so it was hard. He was just.
Yeah, Messier could. His ability to impact the game was completely different than Wayne's. He could do it offensively. He was an incredible skater, and
is he the closest player to Gordie Howe that we've ever had?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the day in the old Chicago Stadium. I actually remember the lead by Kiley was the guy's name, the writer for the Chicago Tribune, and it was in a playoff game, and they needed to win. I can't remember what the series was, but the Oilers needed that win, and it just turned the whole series because Messier came in and scored 2 goals and had 3 punts, 3 points, and it cut like 3 or 4 guys. and Kiley referred to him in the lead as the pumpkin carver, Martinez. It was just a tremendous. And I remember somebody was quoted afterwards said, "Yeah, he got 3 points and forced 4 guys to have stitches or whatever."
That's fantastic. I love it. Well, thank you, Kevin. This was a lot of fun. And I think we've solved a lot of the world's problems today.
Yeah.
On this big list, I made this giant list here of all these different things we've done. So this is what we're work on next time. You guys know this. Remember, folks, the games are on tonight. Again, Edmonton, big chance tonight, of course. We'll talk about that more as the week goes on with Kevin and others, maybe. Remember, without the